bad about your privilege doesn't make you a good person, it just makes you useless. Now, I know that sounds harsh, stay with me, but you know that moment, maybe you tell a friend some good news, maybe you got the job, maybe your parents helped you with rent, maybe you're just happy about something. And the person you tell it to doesn't match your energy. They go quiet or they hit you with a look, and suddenly you feel like you did something wrong by having something good happen to you. Or maybe you post something online, a trip, a win, a nice moment in your life, and someone comments, must be nice, or people are dying and you're posting this, or way to be tone deaf. And it gets to your head. You start feeling guilty for your life, for having a nice apartment, for having loving parents, for not being miserable when the world is falling apart and on fire. And slowly, without realizing it, you start apologizing for your own life. You start shrinking your joy, downplaying your wins, because somewhere along the way, society has taught us that having any good in our lives makes us selfish, ignorant, or out of touch. And the guilt feels like the right response, right? It's awareness, it's empathy. But have you noticed what it's actually doing inside of you? I don't think it's making a lot of people more generous. I don't think it's making a lot of people necessarily more kinder. It's keeping most people stagnant, stuck. And I think it's robbing a lot of people of motivation, because why build anything good if you're just going to feel bad about having it at the end of the day, right? And if you're being honest, it probably can make you bitter. Bitter toward the people who have made you feel this way, bitter toward a world that told you your joy and your money are offensive. You didn't start out resentful, but guilt left to sit long enough sometimes can turn into something uglier. And here's the thing, sitting in your guilt and not doing anything about it, that's actually one of the worst things you can do. But if you actually do care, if deep down you know that you're not selfish and everyone just feels like they're making you out to be, I have something for you, my gentle listener, a remedy. And that remedy is giving back. So if that's been you, if you've been apologizing for your life instead of using it, this episode is your permission slip to stop and to start giving back, because you have more agency than you think, and it's time to use it. Welcome to Get In, You Are Driving, where we go all into how life is tough, but you are tougher, and you always have so much more agency than you think. So here's what we're going to do today. This episode is for you if you've ever felt weird about having safety, support, opportunity, or privilege, and you don't know what to do with this feeling or how to sit in it. Again, maybe you were raised with more than most. Maybe your parents sacrificed so you wouldn't have to struggle the way they did. Maybe you just got lucky. You were at the right place, the right time, right circumstances. But instead of feeling free, you feel stuck and you feel guilty. Like you're carrying something that you didn't ask for and you don't know what to do with this feeling. I get it. I've been there, and I've had to work through this uncomfortable feeling of guilt within myself, the shame, the not knowing if I'm allowed to enjoy this or if I'm allowed to say that. So today, I want to talk you through how I've come to think about this. Not a 3-step system, not a productivity hack, just an honest conversation about suffering, privilege, and what we actually do with what we've been given. So here's where we are going. First, I want to talk about why certain things like suffering, humility feel strange to claim out loud, and how it all connects to this idea. I swear it will make sense later. Then we're going to look at the 2 directions pain can go, because I think suffering eventually asks a question of us, and how you answer this question in your life gives shapes to a lot of things. And after that, I am going to share a framework that has helped me make sense of all of this, and the idea of givers, matchers, takers, and what that reveals how we move through this world. And then lastly, I'm going to tell you why I stopped apologizing and feeling bad for my privilege. And it's not because I don't see it, I very much so do, but because apology without action to me is just performance. And finally, we will end with what I think the actual remedy is and some practicality for you to put into all of this, which is giving you action. And hopefully by the end of today's podcast episode, I want you to walk away with this, that you're not a bad person for having good things in your life, but you do have a responsibility not to feel guilty, but to give back. And that's something you can start doing today. So as you can see, I'm testing out a lot of new setups if you're watching on YouTube. I'm trying to move around my mic, move around my computer, trying to make sure like this thing hears me. Because the thing is, my podcast episodes are really dense and I really think about the words behind them. It's really not something that I feel I can just jump on and talk to you about without looking at my computer a lot. So I really apologize because I don't want to come off as if I'm just reading, but I do feel I would be selling you short and giving you very long podcast episodes if I were to try to memorize this. Like, no. And at the end of the day, I feel you're here for the words, not for me to give you eye contact every 5 seconds. And hopefully I give you a little bit of something to do pretty to get to look at. I mean, this is just in my bedroom. All right. So I'm talking really fast. Let's get into it. And the first part is going to be about why suffering feels hard to claim. And this is really my personal thoughts on this. So it's a bit unrelated, but stay with me. I am going to tie this together. And I think that there are certain things you can't say about yourself. You just can't. It's like they lose truth as soon as you say them. And one of those things is humility. I don't like when people say they're humble. I feel like if you say I'm humble out loud to someone, it just kind of evaporates. Not because humility doesn't exist. Of course it does. But because humility, to me, isn't something you claim. It's something other people notice about you over time. It shows up in how you speak, how you listen, how you take up space, how you move through the world, whether you deflect credit when you could just easily take it, right? It's a relational quality. It only becomes real, in my opinion, in how you carry yourself, not in announcing it or saying it. And I've been thinking lately about how maybe suffering is the same. That there's something about the words I have suffered that feels off when I say them. And I've sat with that discomfort for a while, really trying to understand it. Because, yeah, I've experienced pain, things that were out of my control, things that shaped me. But when I look honestly at my life, a lot of my suffering was me sitting in it, and it wasn't just external. A lot of it was internal because of stories I was telling myself, the things I replayed in my mind, and the weight I carried in a sense that I didn't need to be carrying that weight anymore. Like, I wouldn't say it was a conscious choice, but maybe it was a subconscious choice. And I want to be really careful here because I don't want you to hear that I'm saying you don't suffer. Everyone suffers, we all do. And external suffering is very real. It's material, it's historical, it's part of being a human. If anything, the word life in many ways is synonymous with the word suffering. But I do think there's a difference between experiencing suffering and centering yourself around it, because at a certain point, pain can shift, and it starts as something that happens to you, right? Totally out of your control. But if you're not careful, it becomes something you can carry, cultivate, and even protect like part of your identity. What can innocently begin as a wound can quietly become an internal narrative, one that you revisit, you reinforce, you enlarge, and this happens until the thing that originally caused you pain no longer fully explains the emotional weight you're still carrying. I hope that makes sense. And when this happens, that's when suffering stops being about what happened and starts being about how you keep relating to it. That's what I've at least learned in my own life and in my own experience. Again, the pain was real, but at some point I had to ask myself, am I still suffering because of what happened or because I've made suffering part of who I am? Again, suffering is real, but at a certain point, I think it really does stop being about what happened and becomes how we relate to it. Now, there's another thing about suffering that I know is a bit controversial to say, but here I am. I do think it's quite subjective. Two people can go through completely different experiences and carry completely different weights from those experiences. What breaks one person might barely register for another, and that's not a judgment. It's true. If you want to get more into where I got this idea from and what made me think about it, is a wonderful book called A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor. if you haven't read that book, you need to stop what you're doing right now and go buy it for $10. And I'm not even kidding. It will change how you view your suffering in life. So anyways, all right. So because of this, suffering to me usually needs context, story, and nuance to be fully understood. When someone says, again, I have suffered a lot, without any of the context and nuance, it can kind of feel similar to someone saying, trust me, or I'm humble. It asks for recognition without showing the shape of the experience. Now, I know I'm not trying to say, ooh, show me all your suffering. But again, maybe that's why I hesitate to say I've suffered, because even when I know I've been hurt, it just feels like the moment that I name it and proclaim it, it's, at least for me, feeling like a bid for sympathy, a bid for please feel sorry for me, and I don't know what to do with that super uncomfortable feeling. And maybe this could be closer to the truth as well. I just personally don't want suffering to become my identity. I don't want it to be a settled thing. I don't want it to be a fixed truth about who I am or how I feel about myself. Because to me, if you're going around telling everybody about your pain and your suffering, I mean, I get it, but then I feel like you make it an authority in your life, an identity pillar, a finality. And personally, I'm not ready to let pain have the last word on my life. But here's what I do know. I consider myself to absolutely have had, still have great privilege. But privilege to me doesn't mean a life untouched by pain. That's not what it means at all. Privilege to me means having enough safety, enough choice, enough perspective to ask a different question after the pain happens. Not why me, but what now? Not how do I survive this, but what do I do with this? How do I learn from this? And that question of what do I do from this is where everything changes, because suffering eventually asks something of you, and depending on how you answer, life goes one of two ways. And that's what I want to talk about next. So we're entering chapter 2, which is the 2 directions that your pain can go and can take. So again, I think suffering asks a question of us. And depending on how you answer, it can go one of two ways. The first direction is inward. Pain becomes something you fold into yourself by protecting it, guarding it, and over time, without realizing it, you allow it to start making decisions for you. It becomes a lens, the thing you see the world through, the thing you interpret people through, the thing you interpret yourself through. And slowly that lens starts to limit you, but not in obvious ways at first, more in quiet ways, in the opportunities you don't go for because you've already decided you'll fail, the relationships you keep at arm's length because you've already decided you'll get hurt, the life you don't let yourself want because wanting feels dangerous. Pain turned inward doesn't protect you from more suffering. It quietly multiplies it. And now the second direction is outward. This is when pain passes through you. And instead of allowing it to stay stuck inside of you, it reemerges as something else. Responsibility, generosity, and action. Now, this pain doesn't just disappear. That's not what I'm saying. But it stops having the final word. People who move this direction aren't people who have not been hurt. Oh, they've been hurt, sometimes very deeply. But somewhere along the way, they made a decision that they didn't want their pain to move forward into the world. They wanted it to stop with them. If you know the book It Ends With Us and the major film that came out of it with Blake Lively about It Ends With Us, I feel like that is such a good thing to think about here about what I mean, because if you read the book at all, she was very clear, and obviously in the title, that she wanted the cycle to end with her daughter because she had so much love for her daughter. She didn't want her daughter to go through the suffering she did. So, the question isn't whether you've suffered, it's whether you're going to let that suffering write the rest of your story. Now, I didn't have language for this at first. I kind of figured all this out through pattern recognition. I really like to watch people, and I notice how they move through the world. And over time, I started to see that these 2 responses to pain weren't necessarily abstract ideas. They were things that people embodied. And you could feel them very much so in how people carried themselves and carry themselves. This is still present tense. And again, some people to me took their pain and folded it inward. They were always guarded, bracing, defensive. It felt like every decision filtered through the question, how do I protect myself? And I'm not judging that. That response makes so much sense. I still have that response many times because I'm working through a lot of things. And if you've been hurt badly, and especially if that hurt came in childhood, like it does for most of us, of course you want to protect yourself. Of course you've built walls. This is logical, no judgment. But what I've noticed is that the walls don't keep the pain out. They keep it in. And the longer someone lives behind them, the smaller their world becomes. Other people did something different though. They took the pain, sometimes the worst, most agonizing pain, and they let it move through them. They didn't deny it, they didn't pretend it didn't happen, but they refused to let it become the organizing principle of their life. And instead, they turned it into something outward facing. They became more generous, not less, more open, not more closed. They gave their time, their energy, and their care. Not because they had it easy, but because they knew what it felt like to have it hard. And that generosity, in my opinion, wasn't naive. It wasn't love and light or toxic positivity. It was an internal choice, a deliberate one, and a way of saying, okay, my pain is real, but I'm not going to let it make me smaller, and I'm not going to let it make me unuseful. So, again, not because they don't have real pain, but because they didn't want their pain to move forward into the world. They wanted it to stop with them. Back to the movie analogy. And when I was able to pick up on this and really see it clearly, I really finally understood that suffering does have two directions that it can go. And I really did have to ask myself, so which way is my suffering going? Where is my pain headed? Because I had a choice, and so do you. And it wasn't about whether I had been hurt, because I had been hurt, right? That's already happened. But I did have a choice about what I was going to do with it. Was I going to keep folding it inward and make decisions from fear, from limiting beliefs, from old pain? Or was I going to let it pass through me and become something I could use for myself, for other people, for the world? And I think that's the fork in the road. And here's what I really want you to hear. If you're listening to this, you have that choice too. Not everyone has this choice as easily. I do believe everybody has this choice, but I think it's hard to be in a certain place to make this choice because many people are still in survival mode and they're still in the middle of the pain and they're still fighting to get through. And if that's you, this probably isn't the best time to make this grand question and give it all the meaning. It's maybe time to keep on getting through it and do this later. But if you are past survival, and if you have enough safety and distance and perspective to look back at your pain and ask, well, what do I do now? You are standing at this fork in the road, and the direction you choose matters. And now what I want to do is I want to give you some language for this because I think I have found a good framework, and this is where everything clicked for me, and I hope it can click for you as well. Actually, I want to do a little impromptu thing because I think there is a podcast episode I listened to with Brené Brown that she went into something that I thought was super cool because she talked about armor and building walls out of fear. And she said that there is no courage without vulnerability. And regardless of why you have this armor on, without vulnerability, you can access the experiences that are most meaningful in life, which are love, joy, belonging, all these things. And she said, what's dangerous is the armor we reach for when we are afraid. That is what keeps us from the best things. And all this armor is about vulnerability. And lastly, she said there's no vulnerability without courage, which I already said. But what I really loved was she said that the opposite of courage is self-protection, not fear. We all have fear, right? Like that's not going away. But where it really starts to become a problem is if we're taking all these things from our childhood and our past pains and we're using them to now self-protect from those good things. And another analogy, I don't know where I heard it, was the same walls you keep to protect you are the same walls keeping all the good things and the good people out of your life. And I know for me, I started realizing that I'm now in a place where, okay, the walls I built make sense, but now they're hurting me. And the opposite of courage is to now just be protecting myself and that I need to move through that. So anyways, I just feel like that really fit here. Brené Brown, Really love that episode. Now, let's go into my givers, matchers, and takers framework that helped me understanding. So again, I have been noticing this pattern for a while, how some people fold pain inward, others turn it outward, but I didn't know how to give it language. And I heard Alex Hormozy say this, don't know if it was his, don't know, whatever. Anyways, it's simple. There are 3 orientations and 3 ways people tend to move through the world. And the question is, are you a giver, a matcher, or a taker? So I am now going to take them and break them down into my own worlds and into my own words and what I perceive them as. He didn't go into all this, I did. So let's start with taker. Now, I want to be careful with the word taker because taker kind of sounds like an insult, like, oh, you're a taker. And it's not. It's really not. It's a posture. And honestly, I think it's just our most instinctive one as humans because at a basic level, we all have to take, right? Survival requires it. As children, we're completely dependent on being taken care of. Someone has to feed us, clothe us, change our diapers, protect us. Like, our parents are our giants in our lives for a long time, much more than the average mammal. And we take because, well, we have no other option, right? And for some people, I think that this posture just never fully loosens even as they grow older. Takers, in my experience, aren't inherently selfish so much as they are vigilant. They are oriented toward protection. Their attention is always fixed on what they might lose, what could disappear, what they need to secure in order to feel safe. And yeah, giving doesn't always come easy to them, not because they're bad people, but because giving feels, risky. It feels like exposure. Like, if I give you this, if I share my banana, I might die tomorrow, Like, that's how extreme it is, right? Like, if they offer something outward, then they might be left with nothing. And again, this is a deeply human emotion. And if you grew up with scarcity, and a lot of us have, like real scarcity, whether material, emotional, physical, of course you're going to grab on tightly to what you have. Of course you're not going to let go, right? Like, this just makes total sense. But what I've noticed is that when life is approached primarily through taking, it can quietly narrow. There's little room for trust, little room for abundance, and little room for the belief that what you give might somehow return. And the irony is that this mindset, which started out as survival, but I think then as you get older does turn into a mindset, often grows out of real scarcity, but it tends to keep that scarcity alive because things that don't circulate, they stagnate. We only take, we stop participating in the flow of life, and life has a way of flowing around people who refuse to be part of that current. Now, then there is the matchers, and matchers want to give. There's generosity in them, and there's an instinct towards connection. But it lives behind a layer of caution. A matcher is willing to extend kindness, absolutely. I think a lot of us are matchers, but just not first. They need proof before they risk generosity. They want you to send them a text first. They want you to be vulnerable first. Like, they need to see that it will be returned before they offer it. Kind of think of the disciple, I can't remember which one it was, that was like, well, Jesus, I can't believe this until you show me actual proof. That's a matcher, right? But then, Jesus, you show me actual proof, you got me. I'm your disciple forever. So in many ways, I think matchers are kind of like negotiating with life. They believe in goodness, but not unconditionally. And scarcity still kind of whispers in the background for them, like, they keep mental ledgers of, was that returned, or did I give too much, or did I say too much, or am I safe to offer more? And this doesn't come from cruelty. Again, it comes from a place of fear. Giving feels like exposure, and exposure feels dangerous, so they wait. They hold back. Not because they don't care, but because they're still learning to trust that what they offer won't leave them empty-handed. And I think I said it before, but I'll say it again. I think most people are matchers. It's the reasonable middle ground. It's self-protection dressed up as like fairness. But there's a ceiling to matching because when you're keeping these scores and these mental ledgers, consciously, subconsciously, whatever it may be, when you only give what you're sure you're going to get back, I think that you never really experience what it feels like to give freely. And free giving, let me tell you, that's where something shifts. Takers protect, matchers negotiate, but givers participate. So let's talk about givers. I think givers are often misunderstood because people might think they're naive, they're so positive, they're pushovers, they have all this money to give, whatever. But that's not what I've seen from a giver. And I want you to think about a giver being much more than somebody that just gives money. The givers I observed aren't people who think nothing bad will happen. They're not living in some fantasy where everyone is good and the world is safe. Most of them have been hurt, and many of them have actually been maybe hurt the worst. I would be here to argue that. But somewhere along the way, givers learned that takers and matchers have not learned that withholding doesn't protect you. Givers give not because they're sure they'll get something back. They give because they've come to trust that life moves through circulation. That what you put out has a way of returning. Maybe not immediately, maybe even not ever. Maybe not from the same person, maybe not in the same form, but it returns. Where takers protect and matchers negotiate, givers participate. They offer time, energy, attention, value, and they don't keep score. Not as performance of goodness, not to be seen as generous or as good, but because it aligns with who they want to be and how they want to move through the world. And here is the key about givers. What allows this posture is not the absence of fear. Guys, everybody has fear. Givers still have a lot of fear, but they still feel the pull to protect and to withhold. Sorry, let me say that again. Givers still have fear, right? They are still human. They still feel that urge to pull, to protect, to withhold, to give a score, right? To not give. But they're making a very conscious decision not to let fear be the organizing principle of their life. And that's the difference. They're not better people. They're not more generous. They weren't born with this generous thing. But at some point, they chose a different orientation and they decided that living in fear costs more than the risk of giving. And what matters isn't which orientation you start from. It's whether you ever stop and consciously choose. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying everyone should go around blindly giving all the time. No. There are seasons where you need to protect yourself. Maybe you need to save. Maybe you have less time, right? And we know and we should know that there are unfortunately also bad characters out there who will take advantage of our generosity and our good heart. This is true. Boundaries are real and necessary. But like everything in life, boundaries have a fine line. But the question that I keep coming back to is, and what I want to leave with you, is what's your default? What's your orientation when you're not thinking about it? Are you moving through the world trying to protect what you have at all costs? Are you keeping score, waiting to see if it's safe to give or match? Or are you participating and trusting that circulation is just how life actually works? Because what I believe personally is that most of us start as takers. We move to matchers, but we stay at matchers. And that's normal. That's survival. But I think at a certain point, usually once basic safety is secured, right, we really are given an unsettling freedom and the freedom to choose how we want to now move. And I think people become givers not because, again, they're not better, but because they reach a moment where they are just tired of fear running their lives. And that brings us to privilege, because this is where the two threads finally come together. I am now going to get into why I stopped apologizing and feeling guilt over my privilege. Now, the freedom to choose your orientation, to move from taker to matcher to giver, that's not always available to everyone at all times. And I really want to acknowledge that. A lot of people are in survival mode. And when you are in survival mode, you don't have time to sit around and ponder about whether you're a giver or taker. And we know this because of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Your basic needs need to be met before anything else. And if those are not met, yeah, your brain just doesn't go there. And I want to empathize and acknowledge that. Again, you're just trying to get through life, and that's reality. But privilege, again, I will say it again, is when you have enough safety, stability, and enough breathing room to actually ask the question, well, how do I want to move through the world? And if you're listening to this, and if you have time to listen to a podcast about personal growth and meaning, you probably do have that choice. Maybe not in every single area of your life, but definitely in some of them. And that is not something to feel guilty about. That is something to use. And I want to tell you something about myself. I have lived a privileged life. I still do, and I know that. And for a long time, really until this past year, that knowledge made me feel awful. I'd look around and think about the things that I didn't earn, the safety I was born into, the doors that were open for me and that were closed for others. And instead of gratitude, I just felt heavy, guilty, like I owed an apology for existing. Like, oh, sorry, I was born. And I think a lot of people resonate that, especially within the last few years and how this whole privilege thing, and even now to me, that word has a very tricky connotation. And again, I understand the conversation about privilege, why people are upset. I understand the anger behind it. I didn't want to be one of those people who was blind to their own advantages, right? I don't think anyone wants to do that because, for the most part, most people are empathetic, right? But here's what I started to notice, which was that this guilt that I was constantly feeling was not making me more generous. It wasn't making me productive. It wasn't making me useful. It was making me feel smaller. And honestly, if I'm being really honest, a little bit resentful. So at some point, I had to sit with a harder question, which was I going to spend my life feeling bad about what I'd been given, or was I going to do something with it? Because staying in guilt, I realized, was just another way of staying still and doing nothing. And guilt without action, in many ways, whether you mean it or not, is just performance, and it lets you feel like a good person without requiring you to be one. And then I actually started thinking a lot about, because this is a bold statement of saying I'm not going to apologize for my privilege. But I started to think about, well, where did my privilege come from? And let me tell you, it didn't come out of nowhere. It started with my grandfather, my nono, who left Italy with nothing. He moved to Venezuela and worked for 30 years, a very hard, unglamorous life, had a family at the same time that my mom was born into. And that life and the businesses that he created stability, not just for him, but for my mother, and then the man my mother married, and for me. And it created a lot of opportunity for me. And I'm standing on decades of sacrifice that I didn't make. And this is true for a lot of people who get labeled as privileged. Yes, we have advantages, of course, but many of those advantages were bought with someone else's labor, someone else's risk, someone else's years. And for me personally, my grandfather. Now, that doesn't erase privilege, but it reframes it, because it's not just luck. Like, it's inheritance, and inheritance comes with responsibility. And something else I started noticing was how much of my daily life was also made possible by people I'd never meet. So think about it. Someone died for the freedoms we have today. Someone drives the buses we ride. Someone maintains the parks we walk through. Someone picks the food that I eat. Someone builds the roads we drive on. Someone cleans the buildings at the public restroom at the metro. Like, all these things, all these systems benefit us. Like, everything we enjoy exists because of labor we will never see. And this realization became so clear to me that we all benefit every single day from work we didn't do and sacrifices we didn't make. And once I really made that connection clearly, guilt stopped making sense as the overarching emotion in what I was feeling. Because again, guilt was passive. It was just having me sit there. It didn't build, it didn't help, it didn't honor the people who were making life possible. But responsibility moves. So I made a decision that I was going to stop apologizing for my privilege. Not because I don't see it, I see it very clearly, but because apology without action is empty. It's a way of performing awareness without actually doing anything. And what I have decided to do instead is take radical responsibility for myself and use it and put that into circulation. And I want to say something to those of you who have felt resentment towards people who seem to have it easier than you. First, I want to say I get it. I do. Life is unfair, and it's very painful to watch people receive what you didn't. What I want to share with you is that jealousy, envy, resentment, they don't lead anywhere generative. They keep you stuck, and I personally think they keep suffering alive inside of you. And the logic of I have suffered, so you should too, doesn't move your life forward. It just makes sure the suffering continues. And I'm not saying that's everyone's intent when they get into this whole privilege conversation, but a lot of the energy I feel radiating off of videos and off of people that I've had this conversation with kind of is that, like, well, I didn't get that and you did, and I'm pissed off about it, And it's kind of like, well, do you want everybody to suffer all the time? Anyways, and something that helped me though is realizing that jealousy isn't a moral failure. It's actually just blocked desire that gives you a lot of really good information about the things that you want in life. And I think you only feel jealous of what you want, but you don't believe you can have. So if you feel it, actually don't shove it down, but don't let it harden to resentment. Let it become information and let it show you what you really want. And then ask yourself, how do I build that for myself instead of tearing it down in someone else? So don't let pain calcify into a story that costs you your future. So where does all this leave us? With one question, the question underneath this whole episode. What do I do with what I've been given? That's it. That's the question. Not how do I feel about what I've been given, or do I deserve what I've been given? No. What do I do with what I've been given? And for me, the answer is simple. You give back. And let me tell you what I think that actually looks like. What does this look like? So I think there's 2 practices you can do to help with this, and then a reflection. Not going to give you a system. That's not this kind of episode. Not a productivity hack. It's about, for me, really how you carry yourself through the world. And the answer to this is posture 1, gratitude as a posture. I know you're thinking, gratitude, well, I've heard that one a million times. Well, you're going to hear it a million times and one. I know it gets talked about a lot, but it's not a shallow thing. And what I mean when I say gratitude as a posture is just that, a posture, a way of being in the world, and something that you practice and embody until it shapes how you move through the world. And I think it looks like saying thank you and meaning it, not as a social reflex, but as a genuine acknowledgement that someone did something they didn't have to. It's taking care of your surroundings, your home, your workspace, your parks, the public places you use, treating them like they matter because someone made them and someone is continually maintaining them. It's being conscious of your words, especially around people who didn't receive what you did, not rubbing your wins in people's faces, not complaining about small inconveniences to someone who's dealing with real problems. It's appreciating what your family gave you, even when they are imperfect, even when the relationship is complicated. You can hold both truths at the same time, right? The gratitude and the grief, the thankfulness and the frustration. This is nuance. And it's being thankful for your health when you have it, the bed you sleep in, the heater, the water that comes out of the tap, the fact that you woke up today. There's a question I heard that really stuck with me, which was, if you only had tomorrow what you were grateful for today, what would you have? And it really made me think, ooh, I would have nothing today because I'm not usually grateful. And I realized how often, I took things for granted, how I rarely stopped to notice all these great things in my life, and how maybe I would lose them if I didn't quickly appreciate them. Like, gratitude isn't passive. It's not something that just happens to you when life is going well. I really believe it's a practice. It's attentiveness. It's discipline. It's intentional. And when you implement it, it changes the experience of life. Not because your circumstances change overnight, but you do, and your way of being does. Again, it's a posture, not a mood. It's a practice. And then step 2 is responsibility as stewardship. But not responsibility the way we usually think about it. More like, sometimes I think we think about responsibility like a burden, an obligation. We're officially an adult because we're super responsible now, like it's something heavy to carry. Again, I'm talking about responsibility as stewardship. And to me, stewardship means this was entrusted to me, and my job is to take care of it and use it well. Whatever you were given, job, education, platform, position, body, mind, relationship, you are a steward of those things. They are in your care, and what you do with them matters. And this applies even when the situation isn't perfect, even when you don't like your boss, even when the systems are broken, even when you don't like your country, even when you didn't ask for responsibility. Stewardship isn't about whether you approve of circumstances you're in. It's about whether you're going to show up with integrity anyways. Now, here's where this connects to giving back. If you've received, and most of us have, then the response is to offer value in return. And when I say value, like I said before, a while before, I don't just mean money. I mean, value can be time, it can be energy, knowledge, skill, attention, care. Every single one of us is naturally good at something. Every one of us has something to offer to others that can make others' lives easier, richer, or more meaningful. One person studies medicine, another person farms food. One builds systems, another tells stories. One person is good with numbers, another is good with people. Someone makes things with their hands, someone makes people feel seen with their words. This is how the world works, through interdependence, through people offering what they have and receiving what they need. Giving back isn't some grand heroic act reserved only for billionaires like Chuck Bass, if you've watched Gossip Girl. It's participating in the circulation of life. And again, it doesn't have to be big. Sometimes it's driving a friend to work who doesn't have a car. Sometimes it's sharing what you know with someone who's earlier on the path and you're later on the path. Sometimes it's offering your words or your physical presence when you don't know what else to give. For me, this is part of why I do what I do with this podcast, because I really think that I am good with words, and I know I can take messy, complicated feelings and complex and ideas and break them down into like a complex, coherent essay or a podcast that helps people. So that's why I offer it. And it's not because I have everything figured out. I absolutely don't. But because I have figured some things out. And this is one of the things. And I think sharing this is a part of me participating and giving value. But value takes time. And if you don't know what your thing is yet, figure it out. You will with time. In the meantime, give what you can, whether that's time, energy, attention, care to people. You don't have to figure it all out. You just have to start giving. And I think participation becomes mastery. And lastly, responsibility isn't a burden, it's stewardship. And stewardship is how you honor what you've been given. So with all that being said, I have one reflection question for you. Okay, so I shared my two practices. Again, gratitude as a posture, responsibility as stewardship. But before I give you the question to sit with, I want to name something. We live in a world right now where you're made to feel guilty for not caring about everything. Every crisis, every injustice, every war, every disaster, every cause. If you're not posting about it, speaking on it, feeling it, grieving it publicly, you're part of a problem. You're selfish, you're privileged, you're asleep. And I find this, quite frankly, to be ridiculous. Not because these things won't matter, they do. Suffering is very real in the world, but you are one person, and you cannot realistically carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, and you can't fix systematic injustice by feeling bad about it on your couch. You can't fix what presidents wants to do. You can't solve a war by posting a black square. And here's what I've come to believe after really having thought about this topic deeply. There is so much more power in controlling yourself and working on yourself and creating meaningful change in your actual circle, your family, your relationships, your community, your work, than in performing care for things you have no control over. Because the truth is, you know this, but we don't always act this way, you can't control the outer world. You can't. And no amount of guilt or awareness or doom scrolling is going to change that. But you know what you have control of? Your corner of the world. You can control whether you're a giver or a taker in your relationships. You can control whether you use what you've been given or you just sit around with guilt. And I think if more people got focused on that, on their sphere, on their circle, on their power and influence with where they are, people can actually reach for great things instead of performing outrage with things that they're just never going to have influence over. I think the world would be a lot better. So when people try to make you feel guilty for your privilege or for not caring enough, for not being miserable enough, for not having an emotional reaction, I really want you to remember this. You are responsible for your corner of the world. You are not responsible for saving the world. And that's not a cop-out. That's not looking away. That's the truth about where our power as individuals actually lives. So the question I want you to sit with this week is, what have I received that I didn't earn, and what am I doing with it in my corner of the world? That's it. That's all I want you to do. Because if guilt has been your default response and not knowing what to say and feeling embarrassed, this is your invitation to try something different without shame, without apology, and without performing. Just honesty about your life, clarity about your sphere, and then movement, small, real, meaningful movement in the places where you actually do have power. And if you want something more concrete and something to do this week that will just help you move forward in the smallest way, is give one thing forward. Time, energy, knowledge, or care, whatever you have, give it and don't keep score. It doesn't need to be a grand gesture. Just give one thing freely. And if you're not sure where to start, look around and think about maybe who in your personal life you know is struggling more than you. What do you have that they could use? Maybe it is money, maybe it isn't. Maybe it's your time, maybe it's your car, maybe it's your attention, maybe it's your presence. Think about it. I promise you there's something. Give it and notice how it feels. So let's bring all this together. Just like humility or suffering, privilege isn't something that proves anything by being named. It only becomes real in what we do with it. If you are privileged enough, again, to sit in your suffering or feel guilty or feel consumed by these emotions, then the responsibility isn't to declare it. It's to decide what you do with the freedom that you have. Whether you're going to let that pain turn inward and define you or outward and shape how you move through the world. So, you can't save the world, you can't fix everything, and you weren't supposed to. But your corner of the world, your relationships, family, work, community, the people you can actually reach, that's yours, and that's where your power lives. That's where your privilege stops being a burden and starts being a gift. So please stop apologizing, stop shrinking, stop performing. The world doesn't need your guilt. It needs your participation. That's what you've been given. Be grateful for it. Be a good steward of it. Take care of what you have and put it into circulation. That's how you honor what you've received. That's how you use your privilege that you got without doing anything for it. That's how you give back. Your corner of the world is waiting. Go take care of it. Guys, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening to this episode. I really hope you enjoyed it as I put so much thought into it, and I will catch you in the next one.